Welcome to another CMC podcast. The purpose of our podcast is to get our listeners to think about and discuss different rescue topics. In some cases, you may learn about a new technique or even different disciplines within the technical rescue community. As a result, you're going to hear different and even sometimes opposing opinions from our instructors and our guests. You may or may not agree with them. The key is to keep an open mind and use that information to help guide you to make decisions about your techniques, training, and policies within your own organization. Welcome to another CMC podcast. Today, subject is Swiftwater Rescue. Joining us today, we have Battalion Chief Jim Pellitteri from the Gurnee Fire Department. So, Jim, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself
of course,
and your department?
Yeah, my name is Jim Pellitteri. I've been in the fire service since 1989. I started here in Gurnee. Actually worked with Chris way back then for a year or so. Anyway, so my career started there, and at the time, my department was career and part-time paid, or paid on call is what they called it, and that's how we started. So that's how I started my career here, and then a few years later I got hired traditional career, and it's been my career ever since. And in my career time, I've been part of every specialized rescue team except for wildland, from hazmat to technical rescue to the USAR team in the state to Swiftwater and to dive and ice rescue and all those things. I've been part of that. So it's been a great journey for me. Throughout the years, though, I moved up through the ranks to become a company officer, then a training officer for 11 years. And I really enjoyed, and I understand the value of understanding the specialized rescue components because of that, just making sure every firefighter understands the risks at hand. So that's very passionate to me, making sure we all go home. And then years later, I became a shift commander, a battalion chief, and that's where I sit now. And my department is made up of currently of approximately a little over 60 personnel. We have 19 personnel on shift. We have 3 stations. We run 7,200 calls a year, and we cover 30 square miles. Our claim to fame is, I think, Great America. We have a big amusement park in town, and so that keeps us busy. And then we are very transient as far as people coming to visit our town because of large malls, shopping and dining, and so on and so forth. So we have major highways, water areas, so on and so forth, and we work very well with our neighboring communities. And that's how Chris and I have kept our relationship going, is working with our MABIS divisions and our respective departments. But my career has been a blessing, and I thank God for it, and it's been great.
Excellent, thanks. And also joining us today is the Director of Training for the McHenry Fire Department, Chris Rohde. Chris.
My name is Chris Rohde with the McHenry Township Fire Protection District. I've been in the fire service since 1985. Retired from Wakanda Fire Department in Northern Illinois with 32 years there. Been with McHenry Township for about 18 years. And again, I'm the Director of Training. I'm also an instructor at McHenry County College for the last 25 years, teaching the basic firefighter program. As well as Jim, we've been teaching Swiftwater together and Division 5 SRT, the USAR team for about 15 years. And my passion is water, and grown up on the water. So I really enjoy doing water activities. And with the McHenry Township Fire Protection District, we have about 150 members. We're a combination fire department, cover 54 square miles with a call volume about 6,800, 5 firehouses. We cover a large part of the Fox River, as well as the Stakey Lake. Part of the Channel Lakes is one of the busiest waterways in the country. And we have the McHenry Dam as well, which is one of our target areas for Swiftwater. And we do also have a traditional flooding as well.
Excellent. So thanks for joining us today. So why don't we kind of start out, maybe Jim, if you can tell us, what is Swiftwater? That seems to be a controversial topic with some people. What is Swiftwater in its definition?
Yeah, as I answer that, I do want to give credit to Dive Rescue International for making Chris and I both instructors. That's who we teach for, just so you know. And they're the ones who opened our eyes, I would say, to what Swiftwater really is. I would like to think that most departments I would hope to believe that most departments understand what truly Swiftwater is, but I fear that's not true. Most people would identify with Swiftwater with something you would see with very aggressive rapids, and you respect the danger of it as soon as you see it. You see aerated water, waves crashing through the mountains, and you're like, there's no way I can survive that. But Swiftwater, by definition, is 1.15 miles per hour, which is 1 knot. meaning is on any current at that speed or greater meets a Swiftwater criteria, meaning, according to NFPA, that there's a whole different standard of PPE, training, and equipment that you need to be successful in any type of moving water. Most firefighter paramedics that I have learned over the years don't realize that to be true. They just don't know. They've never been taught. And I was in the same boat. My department was. So I totally get not getting it. But what you need to do is you realize if you see water moving, you think it's calm, it's good. Most people have pleasant experiences at the beaches, rivers, on vacation, so on and so forth. But when you become trapped in moving water, even at a speed that low, and you cannot free yourself, you can potentially drown. And this is a good way to explain it. In my mind, the amount of density or mass in water is much greater than air, obviously. When you have water moving against you at 2 knots or 3 knots, it'll move you, it will push you. But if you have wind at that speed, it does nothing to you. And the truth of the matter is when you enter the water and you become buoyant, it's usually at your waist when you begin to float. Say, I currently weigh about 165, 170 pounds, but when I get into water and it gets to my waist, the average adult weighs about 16 pounds when you float. And that you have no mass, no strength to really fight that current, regardless, unless you can swim, but if the current's too strong. And then if you get stuck in moving water and it's not part of your plan, you will potentially and most likely drown. And what do I mean by that? I think anyone who's ever gone water skiing, what happens is when you try to get up on your skis, and if you don't get up, what do? You let go of the rope. But if you hang on to the rope, and you have even a PFD on, you stay underneath the water, and you're going to drown. It's the same principle. So I hope out of this, we help fire departments, first responders from police, fire, EMS, whatever your background is, that you realize the dangers that truly exist and understanding the risks that you're taking. And Swiftwater is truly dangerous. It's relentless, it's predictable, and it is powerful. And we are truly a guest when we enter the water.
One of the things you mentioned was when you get in waist deep, you become buoyant. Can you get into trouble in water that's less than waist deep?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there is a story. And I was one of the first Swiftwater classes I took, and it was back in 2000. And it was through, I think, lifeguard systems, and they came and taught us. And the instructor shared a story, and I know it was somewhere like in Tennessee, Kentucky, or whatever. But he shared a story where a little girl was walking across the river, and with her family. It was at a state park of some sort, and she got, we call foot entrapment. Her feet got stuck in the river where she couldn't pull them out or get them out. So she's stuck in the water. She's standing. Her parents tried to free her, but they're at a point where the water's hitting their waist, so they couldn't hold their position. So every time they would bend, they would try to float and drift away from their daughter. So they call help, and I believe a park ranger came. And they came, or the rangers or whoever, and whatever the rescue teams were, and there was nothing they could do for this little girl. And from what I understand from that story is that girl drowned and died. Hypothermia set in, they couldn't do anything, and no one knew what to do. And all you needed was truly a piece of rope to work down to her feet, stand where you could stand and hold your position, pull her feet out, and then after you got her feet out, you could help her. And that's one way that people just don't understand. I think the other thing, I have one other quick story, but this is a NIOSH report, and this is what's scary. There are so many water deaths in the fire service. NIOSH has its own category for swift, dive, so on and so forth. But there was flooding in, I think, Denver, Colorado, and a firefighter went to rescue a lady. It was a flash flood of some sort, a traditional flood, hanging onto a stop sign of some sort. They walk out to get her. Firefighter, one of them is swept through an open culvert and is found like a mile and a half down river, and he unfortunately passed away. What happened was the firefighters on that engine company, and you read the NOSH report, were donning self-contained breathing apparatus and trying to become divers in this situation. In other words, my point is they didn't understand the risk. They were doing what they thought was best because they're emotionally charged, I guarantee it. Maybe I would have done the same thing. I probably would have, not knowing what I know now, who knows. But at the end of the day, you try to make the best of a situation with what's on your rig, But especially if you don't understand the risk or the hazards, you could make the situation completely worse. And unfortunately, that firefighter passed away, and none of those firefighters, I don't know if they were hurt or anything, but none of them were significantly injured, if I recall the report correctly. But just firefighters will do what they can, or first responders will do what they can with what they have. But please take Swiftwater or flood water, at a serious place in your heart as a first responder, and understand its risks. If you don't, please get some training, and hopefully this conversation will help that.
And thanks. Yeah. So Jim, you had mentioned about different levels of PPE and so on. So maybe Chris, can you talk about what specialty type of PPE you'd be looking at to use in Swiftwater?
Well, one is to have proper fitting PPE. So one is our PFDs, our flotation device, that you either have a class 3 or class 5 flotation device with a whistle, because communicating around moving water, it's quite loud and it's difficult to do. So we use hand signals and whistle signals just to get anyone's attention. A whistle. A lot of times you can't use a radio in near moving water, or if you're in the water, it's not possible. So we're using hand signals. So proper fitting PPE, which again, that PFD, as well as having a knife attached to that. So if you do get trapped, we have fishermen in the Fox River where we do a lot of our stuff. Jim was talking about foot entrapment. We can get trapped in fishing line or anything else that floats down the river that we can get snagged in. And that PPE, that flotation device is tight, not put on, unzipped. It has to be zipped, all the straps, everything needs to be tight, that it's part of your body. And you really want to almost be uncomfortable in a flotation device, a PFD that'll keep you buoyant rather than rise up to your ear level. You want it really nice and tight to stay below. Proper footwear when you're walking on rocks, or we're not going to be wearing our turnout gear. We want to be in just our regular duty gear. If you have work boots or gym shoes or whatever, know that the rocks are slippery. Things below us are dangerous. If we're working around that river, that you can slip and fall. And proper head protection. We wear Swiftwater helmets that are built for Swiftwater, not technical rescue, not a fire helmet. A fire helmet could become an anchor, strapped around that could be snagged or caught and go down. So our firefighters, when we teach them, if they're going to be in the dry suit or wetsuit, if they're not in a dry suit or wetsuit and they're working around the water, they're in their regular duty gear with a good tight PFD and work gloves and Swiftwater helmets. So we carry that type of equipment on all our rigs, and that they're prepared. And it's not the Mustang suits or the winter suits that you're going into for ice rescue. It's gear that is for Swiftwater.
Okay. Well, and it sounds too like you said this is on your rig. You've prepared for it. So, what kind of risk assessments have you done in your area to determine, where your possible areas are for Swiftwater?
Well, for McHenry, for our department, we have the Fox River running through, as well as the dam. Anytime we've had a bridge added to our district, so when that bridge was being built, we know we had people working below the surface. They're building things, so we pre-planned, and anytime we had work going on in the river, we pre-planned those operations. And we've taken our dam and we've hosted classes there, so we've tried everything that we can possibly encounter there. We've trained that way, and we pre-plan the river ad when it's low, when it's high, and when it's at flood stages. So we're out there all the time looking at the river, sizing it up, and training in every type of situation that we can run across to. We also have the locks, McHenry locks, and control gates as well. So there's a lot of variables that control that water by us, and it can cause some issues.
It sounds like by pre-planning and your sites where this, not only do you know the characteristics of that water, but also where anchors are, access, everything else, right? Yeah,
for our department, we have boat launches. Every boat launch in the district has a pre-plan to it. If it's locked, if it's unlocked, is it upriver the dam, downriver the dam? Is it the quickest way to get to a rescue above the dam, below the dam, or anywhere else in our fire district?
Now, Jim, and you've got quite a different district than what Chris works in. So what have you guys done to kind of assess your risks here?
Well, I tell you, for us, we have a lot of traditional flooding because of the Des Plaines River. in our community. And in fact, our main headquarters station, station number 1, becomes an island when it floods. Everything floods around it. We have to move out. So we have flash flooding and we have traditional flooding in our town. And we could go mutual aid because, Chris and I are part of MABIS Division 4 and 5. And I know Pleasant Prairie, just last year, your old department chief had a house kind of partially collapse into Lake Michigan because of coastal flooding. So all that does exist, but primarily in our fire protection area that we cover here in the village of Gurnee and our district, the Warren Waukegan Fire Protection Districts are what we cover. We have that traditional flooding and flash flooding. Our whole community at one time has been flooded on the west, on the east side, just because of too much rainwater. And then we deal with a lot of people getting trapped in their homes or in their cars, or people wanting to be adventurous during the flood times, and we've had to do rescues when they get lost or stranded on the displays or pinned up against something. So anywhere from kids to adults, to people just underestimating not to drive through moving water. That's a good safety tip. But a lot of people think they can get through. And then what happens when they try, their car starts to float like a boat because it becomes buoyant, so on and so forth. But as far as assessing it, truly, when we started to assess it, is when we started getting properly trained because we realized the risk we needed to do. Because we were using ice rescue tactics for Swiftwater events and we didn't know any better. And I will say this, it will humble you if you really, those of you that are divers or ice rescue personnel or been in ice rescue suits, I just challenge any of you first responders to go swim a complete length or lap in a pool in an ice rescue suit and see how well you do. Chris touched on it. You need the proper PPE, the proper training, and most of all, the basic knowledge of what moving water does, even at 1 knot and greater. And just you will know how to do your duties properly and keep everyone safe and take proper risks, and you'll do a proper risk assessment.
Well, and you had mentioned flood, the flooding too, and I would imagine there are some differences between like normal flood where just a neighborhood just kind of the water gets high versus an area where there's a moving body of water. What are those differences? How do you need to handle those types of floodwater situations differently?
Okay, when it comes to a river, I'll just say that, and that's the body of water that will eventually come. They call it the levee when it comes out when it kind of crests and it comes out of its banks, so to speak. And then you'll look at the area that it will affect. Okay, then it will affect you in many ways. First of all, what's called swift and floodwater the same thing. If you take a river, it's happening in a river, but when it comes out of the river, it floods areas potentially. But as long as it's 1 knot or greater, it's swift water. It's moving. So it's kind of one and the same. So the way you dealing with downtown, so on and so forth, these are the little things we've learned over the years. First of all, when we had no training, we wore waders. And then if you jumped out of a boat into a ditch line, on the street, you're fine. You jumped out, your waders, and you'll drown. We just didn't know any better. We made a lot of mistakes. Now we wear the proper PPE, Swiftwater suits, so on and so forth. And so when you're in downtown, like a downtown area, you have all of a sudden your downtown becomes a river, if you will, moving water down there. So all of a sudden you're close to power lines that still might be alive in your boat. And then all of a sudden you'll run into obstacles like fence lines, gas that's still running to houses that's bubbling through, so on and so forth. So you have to deal with all those mitigations. And then you have to deal with the possible structure fire that happens down and you just let that stuff burn, so on and so forth. But the biggest challenge is getting people out of their homes because a lot of people won't want to leave. And you could tell them they should leave. You could order them to leave. And we do a lot of boat rescues. A lot of boat rescues to get people out of their homes. And that's probably the biggest challenge there. And then eventually people will try to save their homes with generators, so on and so forth. And what we do is pre-plan to see who's still occupied, especially in traditional flooding, you can do this. So and you do these checks on them, make sure they're okay. You just and then you do your own kind of pre-planning in your boat to see where the rivers are, so on and so forth, or where the water level is, so on and so forth. That's one way to deal with it. But experience gets you there. Our downtown probably floods now. It used to be the 100-year flood, but I would guess now every 3-4 years we're moving out of that station. So in that downtown area. And then, of course, when you get enough, it floods your whole community. And that's where the mutual aid system comes in, and you get other teams in to help you if you need it, so on and so forth. But the best aggressive thing we've done is we do Swiftwater training, like Chris had mentioned. I don't know if it was on this or before we started, was our whole department is trained at this level. If you're with a tech, you could do boat rescues, you could do throw rescues, throw bag rescues, or reach rescues. The swim rescue is a very high risk thing, and you want to make sure you have the right people who do go rescues. That's how you deal with that. And then you have the flash flooding, where viaducts flood, so on and so forth. And that's when the first company shows up and they understand those risks. One of the biggest things in any flooded area are manhole covers come up and they get displaced. And you could be walking and you could just fall right through an open manhole cover and down you go. So we teach people to probe ahead with a pike pole or a probing device, which we have, or shuffle your feet. Because I'm telling you, if the water gets static at some point, but if it starts to lower, you'll see that swirl like a tub go down. Mm-hmm. And you know it's there. But just probing ahead is real important too, and understanding all the risks.
So obviously knowing the area in advance is going to help, but there's no way you're going to remember every manhole, every opening in that road or anything. So I could see where it'd be really, really important, even if you think you know the area, to be probing that. Absolutely. So, and you kind of mentioned it too with the manholes. This isn't exactly the cleanest water you're dealing with in flood water. So what kind of things do you need to do to compensate that you're in a contaminated environment or potentially contaminated?
Well, we use dry suits and to protect ourselves, as well as after you're done your deconning. But we're not going to be in those Mustang suits for ice rescue. But yeah, we'll decon. We'll go through the same process as anything else. But we typically use the dry suits for contaminated water.
Yeah, your face is exposed. I mean, you could get some absorption, but inhalation of bad water would be the thing. And that's just the nature of doing that job. You do your best not to, but if you're in a go rescue situation, you're going to get some bad water. Yeah. But if you do go rescue, and then we'll deal with that after the fact, because we are paid to take risks. You can't mitigate everything to make it safe.
Well, it would almost seem too, if you were in some kind of a face piece or something, that could almost increase your hazards.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So we kind of talked about, some of the risk assessment, the PPE and everything. And so I guess being that this is a technical rescue podcast, we'd be remiss if we didn't get into some rope work within this thing. And so I just have to tell the listeners a story. Actually, the first time I ever met Chris was on a Division 4 and 5 SRT drill. Being that we were the lone cheesehead department in the team, we traditionally train mostly with Division 4, which is Lake County, Illinois, the furthest northeast corner. And so Chris is one county over along this the state line. And so I went out to a combined rope rescue and water rescue training where he was going to be going over high lines for Swiftwater. And so as we're getting going in this class, and we're setting anchors and we're starting to get our lines across and tension the lines, I start kind of getting, start questioning some of these techniques. And, my jaw about hits the ground when we're looking at the tensioning techniques and how we're doing this. But one good thing, how fast it's going together. And then he very quickly explained, no, this is a Swiftwater highline. This is not a rope rescue highline. So maybe, Chris, if you want to kind of talk about some of the differences there, because I know if you have no Swiftwater experience, and if you're a rope person that's done any type of highline work, if you see a Swiftwater highline, you're not going to be real comfortable at first with that. So maybe if you can talk more about that.
Yeah. One thing we don't tie safeties on, because safeties will come off in the water. So we're typically not adding that safety, that barrel knot or overhand safety. They're not typically being done. Yeah, we're moving fast. We're using line guns to bring to shoot a line over and just basically wrapping around an object. Maybe it's a large tree. We've used pickup trucks. We've used pickets. We've used large rocks, and basically just getting that far side attached and then tensioning up that rope. We use typically on our team, all of our teams, we use 1/2-inch static current mantle rope, and we tension it up with 3-to-1 and put 6 guys on it. And we just tighten that up until it's nice and tight, about 1,000 foot-pounds. And we're just basically, we don't have any massive equipment that we bring in to measure that. We just have to check and get a good feel on it if it's tight enough for us. And we load that boat up. We keep that system attached, and We may end up tightening it up a little bit more, but we move fast. We had an operation last year, or 2 years ago. We had a car that was in the river up to its roof. It was in about 6-7 knots, and it was up to the roof, and we had to go check, see if there was any victims in it. We used a high line, and it took longer for us it was in a wooded area, to get people over. We were in the back, we were on one side, we were on the near shore, where most of the operation was taking place, was in backyards, and the other side of the river was in a wooded area. It took us probably 10 minutes to walk through the woods to get to that side. And we did a quick line gun across through that lineup, and we had the line set up in about 10-15 minutes, and we were ready to go. So it's a quick operation, and we teach the basic system, very basic system. We're all on the same page. We're not using any fancy equipment. Again, it's just your basic 3-to-1 with some pressing cord, webbing, and we got that basics down. Now we can add stuff if we want to, but we really keep it simple. And by training over and over and over in different environments, we can get that high line up where we're not duplicating any of the systems. It's just a simple high line with a couple control lines and to the boat. We can do a high flow or low flow. High flow is if we got good moving water where we're operating it from the shore, from each shore, or a low flow if we're searching for a weapon or searching for a body in very slow moving water where we can control it within the boat.
So you had mentioned it's a high line with 2 control lines. Do you ever do a reeving high line at all in a Swiftwater environment, or is it just a traditional back and forth high line?
Back and forth, traditionally. If we have a really long, we've trained with 600 or 700 feet across where we've anchored the pulley and just did half the river from one side and did a control from the near shore and only worked half the river by attaching a pulley to that.
Yeah, we know the end point of where as far as the boat will go. Mm-hmm. And so we are able to control both control lines from what we call near shore, where most of the equipment and teams are, and far shores where it's usually the less their part. But it is. Yeah, that's about it.
So do you guys ever use like a cross haul technique or anything like that, or is it predominantly a high line or modified high line for Swiftwater?
Well, I would say in the technical rescue world, it's definitely a modified high line. Yeah. Because it's 1 rope, it's not 2, and it is quick and it's efficient. Mm-hmm. But the loads that can be on it are quite impressive because mass matters in moving water. So in other words, say the water is moving at 4 knots and I stand in it, and I'm parallel with the current. And you feel that mass, but that current or the strength of the water and the power of the water on your legs. But when I turn, perpendicular like this, and the water's hitting more of me, both of my legs, you feel more pressure. Now I put a boat in there. I put that boat on a 45 to move it, and you make it static. The amount of pressure on it is impressive, and it's incredible. If anything, to all the rope, because we're both rope techs too, we know both worlds. You should trust the equipment beyond. I'm telling you, if anything, and we've seen it. We've seen actually because we have to do load sharing anchors in the boat. If it's a rubberized boat, because the anchors are glued, the metal rings are rated, but there's no way to rate the glue how much pressure. And I remember one boat got twisted somehow, and it got static, and it ripped off one of the anchors off the glue, and the other 2 caught. So everything works. We've seen press break. We've seen boats just get slammed, and it is crazy. At the end of the day, I'm a rope. As much as I love Swiftwater, I love rope. That's the first team I ever got into. Trust your basic skills. Trust your knots. Trust your equipment. Buy good equipment. Buy the best equipment, and just know its limitations, know its strengths, know yours. And everything will go well as long as you're not the reason it fails, if that makes sense. And if I learned anything, I trust rope more after Swiftwater.
Right.
So, is that fair? I don't know.
100%. Yes. Yeah. The systems we build over and over and over in the different situations we put ourselves into are safe situations, but the things we do over and over and over, you get to see, and the more you work with it, the more you trust it. And again, the quicker you get. Again, like we said, Swiftwater, you need to move quick. And if you are operating a high line, it does take time. It definitely takes a little bit of time. But if you got the basics down, it goes rather quickly.
And I just want to be clear, those of you who aren't Swiftwater people, just because Chris and I, we always tag team when we teach together, so this is kind of cool. The reason for a high line in Swiftwater is basically to make a boat static in moving water. Okay, and there's tether systems, but when it has to stay there for a while, you won't be able to hold your position with your motor or anything. That's the reason for it. I mean, you can move equipment back and forth, so on and so forth, but that's the primary reason, is to keep that boat static where you want it, and that's the reason. So, and it's a very important skill that we have to all have in Swiftwater. But rope techs will lose their mind if they saw how we do it. Just so
and there are some of the most difficult
people to trick to get it out of their mind.
Yeah, to teach when they're teaching.
They don't understand the speed concept of it. And
well, and then, like you say, you have the single track line, and there's definitely there's major differences in there, but it's proven and tested. So yeah, that's. And I really like the way you talked about too, trusting your equipment, because, matter of fact, there was a really good IDERS presentation here in 21 about, failures and problems in rope systems. And what it showed was, the modern hardware doesn't fail. I mean, a rope doesn't break, carabiners don't break, pulleys don't fail, and unless there is some unbelievably weird load and usually, another mistake put on, which is human in nature. So I think you guys hit it right on the head. It's a human error that normally causes the problem, or an edge. And that's what we see, is that, ropes don't fail unless they're drug over a sharp edge or exposed to a sharp edge, or, again, the human factor, improperly tied knot, improperly rigged, something like that, a human error. So
we are the weakest link.
Mm-hmm.
We are.
So yeah, I think that it's kind of interesting. Now, you had mentioned the team right now. You guys are using 1/2 inch. I know you're in process of switching over to 11 mil here this year, right?
Yeah, for the technical rescue portion of it. Yeah,
but
not for the Swiftwater.
Okay,
we just bought all new rope. I don't know. You know how those Chiefs are.
Okay, well, and that's good to know. Yeah, because in one of our other podcasts here with somebody from the Division 4 and 5 team, we talked about the process of switching over to 11 mil ropes. That's good to know. You are staying with 1/2 inch though for the Swiftwater.
I think in the future it would probably go to 11 mil and to be replaced. Right. I would assume.
Yeah. But and actually, you know what? If we could just kind of take a little sideline here too, because if you haven't listened to the other podcast where we talk about the MABIS Division 4 and 5's SRT teams, maybe if you can talk a little bit more about what the whole team is and how encompassing in the size and the scope of the Illinois MABIS Division 4 and 5 SRT teams are, as far as all the different specialty teams within.
I think we both could answer. I'll start.
Yeah.
Because we just tag team all the time, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Overall, the MABIS Division 4 and 5 have a unique relationship. We share assets, where most MABIS divisions, first of all, that's the unique thing, where 4 would have its own, 5 would have its own. So we're like one big team, which I would recommend just due to the fact that it creates unity, teamwork, understanding, and relationship building between 2 counties. So in our world, MABIS Division 4 is Lake County, MABIS Division 5 is McHenry, but we function as one team. The reason for the 2 separate names is just asset allocation from MABIS. So we have to have 2 separate names, but for them, as we're Lake and McHenry County SRT, which covers hazmat, wildland, swiftwater, sonar, ice rescue, technical rescue, which is trench, confined space, structural, and rope rescue. And there's a logistics mechanic component that supports it. We have so much equipment that every department in Lake and McHenry County contribute funding this, along with our MABIS divisions, who help us get equipment too. But all the departments we're made up of team members, made up of almost all the departments, not all of them. Not all of them can afford to send people to school and get the proper training, but they all benefit from the team by paying a certain amount of money annually to support the team. And currently, we're a team made up of all our departments in both MABIS divisions in both counties, and we work well together.
There's a board that brings the 2 MABIS divisions together. And then after that, we have Christina Loomis, which you talked to before, which is kind of a coordinator. And then you have operations chief for each division that will respond to those calls, as well as respond to each other's calls. Mm-hmm. Then you have a team leader for each of those areas. For example, Jim's a team leader for Division 4 SRT.
Technical rescue.
Technical rescue, as well as the Swiftwater. And then I'm the team leader for for water rescue component for Division 5, which is dive, Swiftwater, and sonar.
Sonar, yep.
And then we'll respond to those incidents as not to take charge of the department, the calls, but to be there if they need any assistance from us. And then we also help schedule the drills and planning of the training, which we do. We have a full calendar on our website that we train monthly. There's drills going on almost every day. It's quite busy schedule, especially during the summertime. And we can add drills to that. And individual departments will host those drills. McHenry, we try to host a handful of drills every year. If it's tech rescue, it's the water towers, cell antennas, whatever we can get our hands on, as well as open trenches. Swiftwater, we host a couple drills a month in Swiftwater. So yeah, it's a great thing. It's been around for a long time. We got on very long time ago, or late 80s. I think we both got on the team. So we've been on the team a long time. We've watched it grow and mature as a team, and it's so much better now than as time went on. The assets that we have, and we're venturing to Wisconsin. Our sonar team has been all over the Midwest. They're very good at their job. They're a great asset.
Well, and if I recall too, you have both side scan and sector scan.
And a lot of teams in Illinois, and they credit to our MABIS division, have those now, which is cool. But Lake County, we had a dive back in the 90s, and I think it was in Lake Villa, where we didn't have the means to find someone in the summer, and we used to bring out like 90 divers or whatever the case may be. And there was the Trident Foundation through Dive Rescue International, and they sent out a sonar, and they had just had the side scan, and they found the unfortunate victim back then. And then since then, Lake County got side scan sonar, and then that kind of started a trend. And it's funny. Don't be afraid, I guess, all you listening, to be the first one to try something new. You just might set the tone for a great direction, because that's how it all started, I think. And it was an unfortunate incident, but it got us to where we're at.
And also for our listeners too, we keep referring to MABIS. We're just used to it in our region of the country. It's just kind of a matter of fact thing. MABIS stands for Mutual Aid Box Alarm System, and it's a pre-organized system that started in the Chicagoland area and is gradually spread out throughout the Midwest. And currently, it's the official mutual aid system for the state of Wisconsin and for Illinois. And I know it's moving into other states rapidly, and not only for technical rescue, but for fire, EMS, and everything else. It's just a really, really well-designed, pre-planned mutual aid system. And then Illinois has taken it one step further with funding allocations and everything to each of the MABIS divisions for some of the specialty equipment. And they've ran with it in directions that I think most areas of the country would be very jealous of. It's just a really well-run organization in the States. So, but just to kind of give you some background, since we've referred multiple times to Division 4 and 5, and what we wanted to make sure that the listeners knew we were talking about there. So you kind of alluded to the four tactics, if you will, of water rescue, especially swiftwater rescue. Maybe if you could kind of go over what each of those entail, and maybe spend some time on the fourth one.
Okay, we'll do this together. Yeah. It's reach, throw, row, and go are four tactics for rescue. Reach means someone's on the shore, you're on the side, and you're reaching with a gym buoy, which is a flotation device, or a pike pole, or some sort of object to pull them in. In this case, the victim has to be strong enough to help rescue themselves as well. Make sense? Okay, and the rescuer stays out of the water. Then there's the throw method, and there's a whole proper thing where you have a throw bag of like 3/8 polypropylene rope that's designed to float, and we use this stuff all the time.
Step in real quick. One of the things, if you do have throw bags on your rigs, is to get them out.
Yeah,
because
and bring all of them.
Yeah, it's a drill that you say, well, I'll know how to throw that bag.
Oh, yeah.
It's something I'll never use, but the time you need it, you need to throw it properly. There's good videos on YouTube. There's good training videos on YouTube that you can go to. But just getting the bags out and throwing the bags is huge. And it's a drill that we do. We try to do quite often. We'll put people in the water and we'll have the shore support throw that bag in. But we also do it we do fun drills where we put a helmet out 30, 40 feet, 50 feet out, and you have to hit the helmet or throw it into the helmet, and you get points for that. And
Yeah.
but if you have throw bags, that's something. Don't just leave them on the rigs. Get them out, train with them. It is an important tool when it comes time. You need it. You may only have one opportunity to throw that throw bag.
And out of all the rope equipment, it's fairly cheap, to be honest with you. So get throw bags. They're usually about 75 feet long. Some are 50. I recommend the 75 footers because during flood stage, the banks get further out and you'd hate to come up short. And if you miss with the first one, you want a second one there. They teach you recoiling, but the victim has to be able to rescue themselves again. And then you have to be prepared if they pull you into the water or whatever. It's a whole situation. So you have to have a mindset. If this doesn't work, are you willing to go in, or is it too dangerous for you to go in? And you have to be able to you have to write people off sometimes. And that's a hard thing in that throw, just so you know, because there are times in flooded areas where the current is 12 knots across and there is nothing you can do. And if you go in, you just become a victim too. So keep that in mind. Then the go method is the boat method, and moving a boat in current is much more difficult, especially in flooded areas. We talked about that prop. You don't want to if you have that outboard motor that you have to put up and down, you don't want to lock it down, because if it hits something, you want it to pop up, because if you lose control of your boat and power in your boat and moving water, you also become a victim as well. I can't say that enough. And then the other thing is the go method. The go method is the swim method. And I am telling you, at least in our curriculum, we teach, it'll say you can't swim against 1 knot of current. So you can't swim upriver. A strong swimmer can maybe get 2 knots and maintain its position. But when you're swimming in a PFD, you're a boat that never gets on plane. I am telling you, because your arms are grabbing more air and it's physically exhausting. So those of you that are go swimmers, you know what I'm talking about, especially if you've been lifeguards, it's different because you don't have a PFD on your chest. And when you have a PFD on your chest and you're swimming, it is very challenging in itself. And you have to be able to negotiate the currents properly, and you have to be well trained, and you have to have the ability to say no go or it's a go as a swimmer based on the current and conditions that you see. So I hope that you have anything to add.
Yeah, no, there are going to be those no-go situations that you just can't put yourself in, that they're too dangerous. And that's the call you're just going to have to make. And we were dispatched to a flooded area, and we were, again, pre-planning when we get there. First thing we do is we just look at what we have. Scouting up and down river, it's important. What happens if we do go in? What's it look like downriver? Where are we going to end up? Are we going to end up somewhere close? Can we get out? Is there obstacles downriver that are going to prevent us, are going to get us in be in a more dangerous situation? But yeah, there is a time that you can just say no. You know, there's going to be those times that it's based on your training, and then training and the basics are the number one thing that we definitely strive on. Is the basic skills that we have: getting dressed as quickly as we can, getting those high lines, throwing those throw bags, everything that we're taught. We just hammer down that we become proficient with it. And train with it as much as we can. And pre-planning, again, you got to know your district. If you don't know your district, there's going to be you'll be surprised. It's time you don't want to learn is on the job. You got to learn ahead of time.
And one of our instructors, Kelly Byrne, has a saying that experience is something you get about 1/10 of a second after you need it.
And that is well said. Well said.
Unfortunately, a lot of truth to that statement. So I see we're kind of getting towards the end of our time here. So Jim, anything to kind of wrap us up?
I would say, first of all, I want to acknowledge my relationship with Chris. We've blessed. We've trained so much together and we've learned so much. But when it comes to Swiftwater and floodwater and all that stuff, I can't say enough. Train, pre-plan and train, just like you do. If you take training for granted and you don't take it serious, because that will build your confidence, especially in the specialized response areas. Most of our experience will come from training and not the actual incident. And the only way you grow confident is the more you train, especially in any of the specialized areas. Things you do every day, I get, but train, be safe. And remember, please do research if you have no background on Swift or flood water, and it will surprise you of what moving water can do and how you're a guest in water. Never take it for granted.
I'd say the same thing. Working with Jim for these many years has been a blessing. And we've learned from each other. We've seen a lot of different things, and I can't say it any more than he did. It's about training. And And training, it's the basics, and again, I've already mentioned again, pre-planning and training.
And proper equipment. Proper equipment.
Well, excellent. Well, thanks both of you for joining us today and kind of educating us, a little bit here about the Swiftwater environment. And I know, one of the things we discussed offline prior to starting the recording was, the vast majority of people don't really understand what Swiftwater is. And just having that knowledge of what Swiftwater is, hopefully will help prevent, some incidents in themselves, just understanding what the dangers are. Because if you don't know what the dangers are, it's pretty hard to deal with it. So I really appreciate you coming on and educating both, our listeners